Excuse me, we're not getting sound, I think.
No sound.
Is that any better?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. It automatically switched back to my phone, so my apologies, everyone. Okay, so good afternoon again. Thank you for joining the State Library of Pennsylvania's virtual Lunch and Learn program. Today, we're featuring Conservator Aaron Warkentin in a discussion about bringing the glory of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Education building back to life. We will hear about how the Forum Building offices and the historic State Library of Pennsylvania renovations are progressing, and State Library staff will facilitate a Q&A discussion after the talk. The Forum was originally designed for the Department of Public Instruction and is a veritable record of the history of mankind. Upon its walls are engraved the rise and fall of civilization. Its sculptures, inscriptions, and magnificence inform and inspire all who step within its portal. Aaron Warkentin is an armchair historian, bibliophile, and museum professional, currently serving as curator with the B.R. Howard Conservation Team. In his free time, Aaron enjoys visiting Civil War and Pennsylvania's industrial history sites with his two sons and wife, and volunteering with the Rolls-Royce Foundation, where he indulges his love of pre-war automobiles. He enjoys opportunities to dialogue with the public, as he is doing today for us. So welcome, Mr. Warkentin.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be invited to talk at the Lunch and Learn and discuss about what we're doing to care for this historic building. So what I will start off with, give me a moment, I'm going to share the screen with our PowerPoint presentation. And here we begin. So what we're doing, B.R. Howard and Associates, is specifically related to the work in the State Library. As you can see on your right is an original photo that was taken in 1931 after the opening of the State Forum building. So this is a $90 million renovation and conservation project, and we're one of many contractors that are involved in specific components. And we're going to talk about what we're doing to care for this historic structure in terms of the wood interior of the library and also the Art Deco aluminum balustrades. So a little background information was given about where the State Forum came about, or as it was called when it was first opened in 1930 as the Education Building. But what I wanted to talk about is how it actually also worked into a larger scheme. The Capitol campus, as you can see here in this modern photograph, was conceived during the early 20th century, and its purpose was to help coordinate both aesthetically and help centralize the state government bureaucracy system. And this was actually developed as a concept by the famed architect Arnold Brunner, who was out of New York City. He was engaged to help create the landscape and help develop this plan that would take place over several decades so that the Commonwealth would have a both pleasing and functional government campus. Here we have is images of the Education Forum building. You'll see on your left is a photo of its construction in 1929. And then also on the right is an image actually out of a pamphlet commemorative booklet that was created after its opening. It was dedicated in September 16th of 1931. And I think it's important to remember that that was only 2 years after the Great Depression had begun. But of course, at that time, people felt that the Depression wouldn't last long, and this had already been in the works for many years. And so the Commonwealth pressed forward to build this structure. It was designed by Groen and Ross, who also built the Sailors and Soldiers Memorial Bridge. That had opened just 1 year previous to the dedication of the Forum building. They would also go on in 1939 to do the Finance building, which is on the other side of the campus. Its architecture is classified as neoclassical in design, but there are a lot of other little elements that were added in to give it a unique flavor. And it was built to house the state education department, the law library, and the general library, which I will be speaking specifically about. It was quoted as, by the Commonwealth, the building is a veritable record of the history of mankind. And they also viewed it as a living structure that they would use to continue to build and care for the knowledge of men. Here I want to show briefly this commemorative booklet that was published in 1932. And this was created in order to recognize the work and the effort and the purpose of the Education Forum building. What's interesting is when you look on the back page, it initially sold for only 50 cents. I paid $10 for this copy, but I bought this once I started working on the project. I became so enamored by its history and its artistry, its architecture, that I hunted down one of these commemorative booklets, which I must say this was the only one for sale on eBay in the entire country. So I was very excited to get it. So the general library. Here's an image that was taken just before the renovation began. You can see how the woodwork has darkened over time. We'll talk more about the finishes and how that was removed, and then the layer of wood veneer conserved and then refinished. And you'll also see the unique designs of the balustrades that are on each floor. It contains 25 miles of shelving, which is phenomenal to me. So you can only imagine the number of books on all that shelving, and around approximately 3.7 million items from books to microfilm. So that tells you the kind of breadth of knowledge that's being preserved and also being provided for the public to interact with. So the balustrades was the first project I was involved in and helping project lead. You will see there are actually 3 different designs for each floor. Floor 5, 6, and 7 have very unique designs that relate to specific, probably specific parts of Pennsylvania history. You'll notice the top floor, number 7, which is the swastika pattern, which is an ancient Native American symbol of harmony and peace. Then you will have the 6th floor, which appears to be really stalks of wheat. Probably it was to show, it's a motif to show the agricultural wealth and importance of Pennsylvania. And then finally, the 5th floor, which has a very unique kind of Grecian vertical design. These are all made of aluminum and brass. And you'll see more of what it took to remove them, clean them, and then reassemble them. So this is what we had to do for the balustrades. Once again, it was a disassembly. This is after the removal. We removed every single one, wrapped them, and brought them back to our studio so we could disassemble, clean, seal, and then reassemble. And we've actually began the reinstallation of the 7th and 6th floor. But currently, until the process is finished of the interior renovation, they will be wrapped in FF foam for their protection. So you can see here what it takes during the disassembly. This is the 7th floor, which in some ways was the most complicated motif. Each railing is custom built to fit the space between the columns. Fortunately, the original craftsman actually serial numbered all of the railings. So we are able to make sure that each component, which is serial numbered, will actually fit together. Very important not to end up with any miscellaneous pieces. So we worked very hard to make sure that when we disassembled, all the pieces from that specific railing unit was put together, marked. As you can see on your right, it can show you the stack in which I ordered all the unique pieces. This is during our cleaning process. You can see some of the lateral and vertical pieces that are used for the supports, the uprights on the left. You can see what they were before the cleaning process and what they were after the cleaning process. What you see before cleaning is 80 years of buildup of cleaning materials, of waxes, all these things that go into care for them. Over time, they build up, and we needed to strip all that away. Once we did that, we then sealed the aluminum by creating a barrier layer of wax. You'll also see how we had to, in the upper right corner, we had to get into every nook and cranny to clean out any residual materials. And you can see on the bottom left there, the brass finials, the brass balls that go on the legs. You can see before and after. And we had a gentleman who's very good with brass. He was able to go through and clean each brass component, whether it was the rosettes or the medallions or those brass balls, and then he clear coat sealed them. These are some of the tools we used. You will notice there was a sanding belt that was used to get into a lot of the very intricate patterns. We had a larger sanding roller machine, which we would run a lot of the items, especially the long bars, so that we could get the facing surfaces. We used a variety of grits from 320 to 280. And we had to be aware that when we removed the balustrades, we saw that there were actually not serrations, that there was a graining that we wanted to maintain, clearly created during the sanding process in 1930. So we wanted to maintain that process because we're trying to make sure that we keep the historical aesthetic of these balustrades. And you can also see on the right, we also used a number of hand tools that allowed us to be able to do much more precise cleaning and work. Here is while we were doing the assembly, but I wanted to explain once again, I had mentioned earlier, the organization is key. You'll see on the palette how we organized these particular units. We also marked down, you can see on the blue tape, the individual serial numbers. Once again, it was only myself and two other technicians. We were the only ones that dealt with the balustrades because we wanted to make sure there was a consistency of the process. You can see on the left the stampings that were hand stamped by the craftsman for each individual lattice. You'll see the number 981. And what was great too is, once again, I had mentioned that they're custom. So not all of the individual components were the same dimension. They would adjust it as they assembled them and installed them into their specific place between the columns. They would shave, adjust, bend. So you had to make sure that you did everything in order according to the number stamp, 1 through 10. Here is a photo showing the reassembly process. So you can see it was a jigsaw puzzle. It was really a Tetris. And we had to perform this task on 2 or 3 different balustrades so that we could get our process down. So we knew work from bottom left to upper right. And that's how we would slowly assemble them. You can see the rosettes for the 7th floor. Here I developed essentially a cheat sheet, a process sheet that we would provide that we actually had with us on each table, even though it was just the three same people doing the work. We wanted to ensure, considering how much we were dealing with, that we had our cheat sheet with us to make us help us remember the order in which we did things. Here's another lattice system we're working on. I wanted to show the fact that each floor, because of its unique design, had unique challenges in reassembling. You can see these lattices, because of their design, they essentially are springs. So the moment we unbolted the uprights and the horizontal support pieces, they unsprung. So you can see we used probably 10, 15 different clamps in order to work and cajole the pieces together as we installed each medallion. You can see down there how everything's laid out. We laid out all of the medallions, we laid out all the different fasteners, all these aluminum screws and the sizes and the brackets, and that greatly increased not only our efficiency, but increased the quality process. And so here you can see, this is a specific unit. You can see the before and after process. It will look far more radiant once the public can go inside the library and actually see them installed, especially with the new LED lighting. So the column veneer. Once again, this was a big process. I was involved in some of the work on the columns, but mostly with documentation. We cleaned, documented, repaired, stained, and finished. Here you can see we're doing test samples. Our lead conservator, Brian, who's the proprietor of the business, he went in there and actually did different samples on several different columns in order to determine what will be the appropriate cleaning process and the appropriate finishing process. So you can see a before and after. And here's the documenting. Once again, documentation is a key so that we can be aware of what was before the treatment process, what is taking place during the treatment process. It also helped our technician team on site to determine priority of which issues should be resolved first, and then coordinate those with any other work or contractors on site if need be. What you can see here is I went through, created a spreadsheet so that I could be able to chart down all the issues of the veneer that needed to be resolved, whether it's repair of an entire panel or specific panels or specific components of that panel or areas. You can see this is a repair I did. This area had been damaged at some point long ago, and so I was able to use a piece of veneer. And one thing that has been brought up is, what is the veneer made of? So according to the booklet, and it appears that this is the majority of this is true, is this is Mexican Honduran mahogany, which now is listed as an endangered species, but it is, its origin is actually the Sierra Madres along the Pacific coast in Mexico to Honduras, but it's a very rich figure in it. So when it is actually finished, it's very bright and has a very unique figure or look to it. And so you can see here, I was also using a piece of Honduran mahogany. I had to trace, cut out, and then place the piece in there so that it fits. So once it's finished, you will not be able to actually see the cut lines or where it was set in, unless you know where it is. Then or you're the person who actually did the work, and I can see it all the time, but most people cannot. So here's another thing we did is, over time, the veneer would actually detach from the substrate of walnut wood paneling. And so we would actually inject hide glue, which is organic glue, and we'd inject it in behind and then compress it together and let that sit over a period of 24 hours. The next thing we were also working on was radiator covers. That is also the wood component. Those were in each alcove. These were built structures that were installed over granite feet. And the original water radiators, steam radiators, those have been removed. New high efficiency radiators or units have been installed. And so in the process, we had to clean, repair, and conserve the existing decorative covers. So what you see here is the process of a test fit. And when it was at our studio, we designed in-house the new leg system, which was then built for us by metal craftsmen. And these will then have the granite pieces attached to the face. This is in the process of finishing. We had sanded and cleaned the old finish, and then you can see on the right what the new finish is. It really brings out a beautiful, lustrous figure of the mahogany. So I just want to say I thank you very much for the Pennsylvania State Library, and I also want to say thank you to our crew who work tirelessly to work to preserve and conserve this piece of Pennsylvania Commonwealth history. And if there are any questions and answers.
Ellen, you are muted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, there are a few questions here in the chat. How long did it take to clean the lattice from start to finish?
For one railing unit, we were probably we were looking at about a week, because we would have to do the disassembly, catalog it, clean it, and then reassemble. So it's probably about, I'd actually say about 20 hours. So half a week for one unit, because we were doing about 2 units a week.
And how many of them were?
Oh, well, because two floors, 7th and 6th floor, have about 14 units. And then the bottom floor, the 5th floor, has not only that atrium units, but it also has the alcove balcony units. So we're looking at a couple miles worth of, or at least a mile worth of aluminum when you stretch it all out, right?
Mariah asked, how did the construction company include these in the redesign? She also asked, is this is a restoration of the State Library building, not new construction?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. We are there to care for what has come before us, and that's our job as conservators. So.
Right. So yeah, Mariah, the office space in the building is new construction on those upper floors, but the historic part of the building, like the lobby and the libraries, are being restored, not remodeled as new, as modern.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so Antoinette asks, she says, very interesting and exciting. The building is near and dear to me since childhood. My father used to take me to afternoon concerts there. Such an inspiring place, which led me to a love of geography, then geology. Thank you.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of us have fond memories of going to study as kids, or just sort of wandering around the building and admiring it. So the forum, especially with the ceiling, as when in the auditorium as kids looking up at that sky, is just amazing. Ashley asks, when is the building expected to reopen?
Well, there is a discussion that it would be around spring of next year, 2023.
And Janet asks, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought I heard somebody else answering here. Was smoking allowed in the building prior to the current policy on no smoking? And is that the main cause of the wood panel discoloration?
Yes, I think there is indication when we were removing the finish and cleaning that there was nicotine and soot. I think that would probably have also affected when the Johnson Conservation did the sealing. They also had that issue too as they were cleaning. It was like a kind of dark sooty material. So most likely that had something to play into that.
Now, we in the initial registration form, there was a spot for people to ask questions prior to this presentation. So I want to address some of the questions from there. The first one I see what are the plans for the libraries and bathrooms? So if anyone else, I know Michael and Kathy, if you want to address what the plan is.
This is Kathy Hale from the State Library of Pennsylvania. The bathrooms were done not too long before this restoration was done, so I don't believe that they're going to do too much to the bathrooms. And the library is part of what Aaron is talking about, that the main library and the law library are getting some different renovations, that there will be, instead of the in-window air conditioners, it will be central air, and some other things that will not look exactly like the state library that you may have seen during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Thanks, Kathy. Was the building part of a WPA project?
So this is Mike Lear from the State Library. So it was actually a little bit too early for the WPA. That was founded in 1935, and the Public Works Administration was founded in 1933. So the Forum was completed, the education building was completed in 1931. However, the finance building and the Northwest Office Building in the Capitol Complex were assisted by the Federal Public Works Administration.
And also the document that Mike Lear put up into the chat was funded by the WPA Writers Project.
Who created the metalwork in the building? And were there other buildings like the North Street office building that benefited from that craftsman?
So this is Mike Lear again. So that was a architectural sculptor named Lee Laurie, 1877 and 1963. He did the exterior bronze doors and the original bronze elevator doors that they unfortunately replaced back in 1972. They're replicating those. They're supposed to replicate those through an etching that follows the original design. Lee Laurie also did the sculptural work for the Northwest Office Building, a sculpture in stone on the north side of the Finance Building, and the eagles on top of the State Street Bridge pylons. His other work in the country, he also did the doors for the Library of Congress's Adams Building, which was a WPA Public Works Administration project. And he also did the Atlas sculpture at Rockefeller Center. So it's the one holding the globe rather than the golden sculpture that you see.
The next question, when did the Department of Education move out of the Forum? And will all of PDE move into the Forum building once the renovation is complete?
So that was 1979 when the Department of Education moved to 333 Market Street Tower. And that is our understanding that the entire Department of Education is coming back either March or June next year, was what the acting secretary said yesterday in a town hall meeting.
Is there a list of the wall engravings and what they represent and who did the engraving? Also, the iron gates also depict different occupations. Is there a list of those and what they represent? Did a different person do the gates as opposed to the wall?
So the links that you see in the chat, there's you can get a great detail on those, but the short answer is it was a couple different people. The exterior wall sculpture surrounding the Forum Auditorium in limestone are by Carl Paul Genowin. The lobby sculptures on the marble columns leading into the lobby from the vestibule were by Genowin and Henry Kreis. And they represent, I think someone asked what they represent. The three portals leading from the vestibule to lobby represent subjects taught in Pennsylvania schools: botany and zoology, history and the three arts, painting, sculpture, music, physical culture and literature. And then the bronze gates by Lee Laurie on South Drive depict man's ways of labor. So it shows industry and craftsmanship. There's 120 panels in the 3 sets of doors to entering from South Drive. The gates on Walnut Street around the Forum Auditorium depict man's creative and recreative occupations: science, poetry, music, arts, religion, recreation, and amusements. So yeah, if you take a look at those links, so there's 3 links there that kind of run together. But if you take a look at those links, then that'll give you the detail.
Yeah, there's great information in those booklets that were are digitized there for you. Okay, what steps are you taking to mitigate potential collections disasters from facilities failures, leaking HVAC, etc.?
So part of the renovation was that the contractor, since we couldn't move all the materials out of the building, some materials were moved that were in areas that were critical to a major part of the renovation, but other items were covered in plastic to protect them from dust and debris from the project. And they were running portable dehumidifiers to prevent a possible mold outbreak. And then staff have been, since we moved out of the building during the pandemic phase when we were working at home, and once we came back to the Capitol complex, staff visit the building periodically. There's also the workmen are there to inform us of any incidents, and then we visit periodically and can keep an eye on things.
Will the State Library, once fully renovated, continue to be open to the public?
That is absolutely going to be happening. You may have to make an appointment to look at certain things, but we will be open to the public as we always have been. This is Kathy Hale.
Thanks, Kathy. And there was one more question about parking. There isn't much parking available at the Forum. Is available parking a consideration in the renovation plan?
Parking will be determined by the Department of Education.
And one thing I can say that I have to be kind of careful, part of the plan is to widen South Drive,
Right.
which I think may provide additional angled parking. But considering there's 526 or 400 or 500 people, you have to draw your own conclusions if that's going to be enough parking for everyone.
I'm going back to look at the chat here. If anyone wants to unmute and please feel free. There's someone, Pamela had posted a link on the mural in the finance building ceiling that was restored. So that is really beautiful. Was the rare books library included in this renovation?
Well, we're not initially, since that project was completed about 2006, a complete renovation, but we are getting new fire suppression systems, so it is of the same vintage and configuration as the building at large.
There were a couple comments here about how much we all love the cat in the lobby. So shout out to the cat. Janet says, thankful that we are recognizing the significance of this architectural treasure and restoring it for future generations. Does anyone know if there are plans to continue with restoration of other buildings such as finance? Is there a guide to all of the buildings in the Capitol complex?
Yeah, so that's determined in part through the Capital Preservation Committee, and there is a kind of a brochure that's also linked in the chat to the buildings in the Capitol complex.
I see another one here for Aaron. I'm so impressed and looking forward to seeing it in person. My two questions: at the time of construction, was it common to have designs like the Forum ceiling produced as painted wallpaper? And are you restoring the diagram of the solar system as originally conceived? Since I think they show or mention Pluto as a planet in what was installed originally.
So first part of that question is, it was not uncommon in public buildings to actually paint on the walls and not actually print out a wallpaper. We're not actually involved, our studio, with that conservation. That's actually another conservator who is a good friend and colleague of ours. He will be involved in working on that, and he's well aware of maintaining the authenticity of that work. So if Pluto's there as a planet, it's going to stay there as a planet. So.
Antoinette asks, are the wall maps being cleaned too? Is that part of that separate?
I think there is a plan. Once again, we're not involved in that. That will be our colleague. But yes, the wall maps, if there's any need for any repairs, touch-ups, or cleaning itself, that should be taken care of. So.
Aaron, was your firm involved in the finance ceiling restoration?
No, not that I know of. No. Yeah.
I think that's all I see from the chat. If I've missed anything, people feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
All right, I might mention, I think there was one question, several part question about the extent of the renovation. So, you know, as we mentioned, what's happening in the main spaces of the state library are restorations, but there is complete HVAC being installed, including a new chiller plant that was constructed on Walnut Street side that will be hidden mostly underground. There's new wiring completely, fire protection systems. They're repainting the hallways and the doorways, the original colors. They cleaned the entire facade. And of course, the restoration of the woodwork, the bronze doors, painted ceiling restoration, the marbles being restored. There's a new loading dock constructed, a new area for DGS management of the building, and then the main new construction are modern office spaces in the wings on the third, fourth, and fifth floor, and in the rotunda area, third, fourth, and fifth floor, and that houses the majority of the people moving back in. So there's some new break rooms, new elevators, insulation they put in, and new windows. So one of the questions why it was taking so long. So part of that is pandemic delay, supply chain problems, and just the complexity of doing something that's not totally new construction from the ground up, because it was a complex project to work around existing features of a building and the parts you want to preserve versus the new construction.
Yeah, I'd actually like to weigh in on that too. Because conservation work is far more detailed than new construction, every project is different, even when it appears to be the same. So a good example is we could be doing 2 historic carriages, but they'll require different different ways in which to care for them. And that's actually true in this situation too. So whatever we're doing in one component of the state library may not bear forth in other parts. And that requires care in how we develop a way to care or conserve or refinish certain components. So it's not a straightforward, there's no book you can purchase, and it takes time. And we're always aware of preserving the integrity of the historic structure. So that's always kind of hard to explain. People say, well, don't you just strip the wood and just refinish it? It's not quite that easy, because it's so important that we do not damage, for instance, the veneer or the aluminum railings. And then, of course, working with the other vendors who are trying to upgrade and improve the efficiency in the structure, whether it's HVAC or electrical. So it's an interesting combination of having to have good communication and rapport with others, taking your time in how you're interacting with the structure itself, because in a way it's kind of a living structure, you know, and you want to care for it no different than a doctor would for a patient.
Ellen, somebody asked if there were tunnels under from the state library to other buildings. There is no tunnels that we know of. You know, they've been digging a lot and haven't found any. There is none between the Forum building and the finance building, because that's where the steam heat plant is. So you can't exactly go through that. And any others would have to go through underneath Commonwealth Avenue. So no, there are no tunnels from us to anybody else, although sometimes in the winter we wish there were.
Aaron, has anyone found any secret treasure or weird things sort of while you were doing your project that were tucked away in the Forum?
So when we were removing the fascia pieces that covered up the edge of the floors, we had to remove these fascias between the columns so we could access the bolts to remove the railings. Inside those fascia features, evidently the craftsmen in 1931 were struggling to fill gaps and holes, so they were using newspaper. And then they put plaster over it. So you're opening up these newspaper from 1929, 1930. And that was kind of fun, which was a problem because we started reading them.
Of course.
But while we're trying to do this work, we're like, oh, wow, you know, loaf of bread was only 5 cents then. You know?
Will you be preserving any of those items that you found?
Yes, we have kept some of those pieces of newsprint. So yes, and those are things we can give back to the state library.
I did notice over in the library when I was in with Michael, some bottles, some really old bottles that they found sort of in the ground or where they were digging out, and they saved all of those. So I'm not sure if eventually those are going to be maybe on exhibit somewhere in the Capitol complex of what was underneath there when they started digging up, or history from the 8th Ward. Nope, I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Workington, for providing us this information and giving us an idea about the beauty of what we're going to see when we re-enter the new building and are amazed by all of how amazing it
Or
was
that-
back in the.
Yep, you're gonna need your sunglasses to come in.
Or,
Yeah.
or Ellen, there's actually one about instructions given to custodial staff about the care of the woodwork and the metal.
Oh, I don't see
And,
that.
and would you have recommendations you're going to give DGS for maintaining your restored areas, your restored items? Aaron.
Yes, yes, we will actually work up a recommendation on how to maintain so that what you see now can be preserved for time immemorial.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of thank yous for your efforts, Aaron and team. We can't wait to see the finished product.
Well, thank you very much. We are honored at our studio to be a part of caring for Commonwealth history. So.
Yep. So this is recorded. It will be available on our state library website in a week or so. So check back in if you want to have a look again. And thanks, Mr. Workington, again.
Thank you.